I'm Nathaniel Stinnett. I'm the founder and executive director of the Environmental Voter Project. This nonprofit that I run identifies millions of non-voting environmentalists, and then we work with thousands of volunteers to use behavioral science-informed messaging to turn them into new voters and eventually consistent voters. But that's not what I'm talking about today. What I am talking about today is the election that's coming up in 3.5 months. I'm going to have a completely nonpartisan presentation. I'm not going to discuss any candidates, but we all thought that there are a lot of potential donors and potential volunteers in the audience who are trying to figure out, as climate-concerned individuals, how should we be thinking about having an impact over the next 3.5 or 4 months. And at the Environmental Voter Project, because we have access to an enormous amount of proprietary and regular voter data, we have a lot of insights that we thought would make sense to share with you. So that's what I'm going to discuss over the next 11 and 12 minutes. In a second, what you'll see on the next slide is we're going to look at 4 different variables, okay? So the variables that I think potential volunteers and donors should bear in mind as they're considering how to have an impact in civic engagement and in politics. The 4 things that I think are important to bear in mind are, first, if you are donating or volunteering, the ultimate goal, of course, is to reach a voter. Now, sometimes those voters, when they go into the ballot box, they're only going to see maybe one election that is impactful. Sometimes, though, they're going to see multiple elections, president, US Senate, tight congressional races, lots of down-ballot races. This is important for you as a potential donor or a volunteer to understand, because you can have a much bigger ROI in those elections. The second thing you want to bear in mind, there is essentially a 3-legged stool to every political campaign: voter registration, voter turnout, and voter persuasion. For voter registration, there are a lot of things at play. A lot of things at play. Some states have automatic voter registration, where you go to get a license and you're automatically registered to vote. Other states have same-day voter registration. What does that mean? That means you show up even on election day, and if you're not registered to vote, they'll say, don't worry about it. We will help you register right now. So essentially, voter turnout is the same thing as voter registration. These are very important things to bear in mind if you're going to be supporting voter registration efforts. The second stool of any campaign is going to be voter turnout. There are certain battleground states where there are a whole bunch, like enormous numbers of people who care deeply about climate and the environment, yet they don't typically vote. And so they are turnout targets. The third thing is, of course, voter persuasion. There are people who are likely to vote, but they're still making up their minds. They're still making up their minds who to vote for, or maybe even what issues to prioritize. So those are the 4 variables that I want you to bear in mind as we go through this process. First, are the voters you communicate with going to impact multiple elections in your state or just one? 2, is there a voter registration play in your state? 3, is there a voter turnout play in your state? 4, is there a voter persuasion play in your state? We're going to talk about 7 battleground states today, okay? Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I wish I could say those are the only battleground states. as you are all too aware, I'm sure, things are a little chaotic right now. There is reason to believe that we could have battleground states in Maine, New Hampshire, Virginia, even parts of New York. All right, we're going to start with Arizona. Arizona, in 2000, the election was decided by, I believe, 10,400 some states. We know that voter registration is an important opportunity in Arizona, okay? There are no same-day registration laws and no automatic voter registration laws in Arizona. So no AVR, no SDR. Now, they have a fairly high voter registration rate, 76% voter registration rate, but especially for people who care deeply about climate, there are a lot of new potential climate voters every year, and so voter registration is an important play for potential donors and volunteers. Voter turnout. At the Environmental Voter Project, we've identified 230,000 already registered voters in Arizona who care deeply about climate and the environment, yet they have never voted before. So they are absolutely high impact turnout targets. And if you look at an average of recent polling, there are approximately 250,000 likely voters who are still persuadable. Does that mean they're all going to go one way or the other? No, of course not. But if they go 60% one way, well, that's a 20% boost, 20% of 250,000. We're going to be talking about a real number here. Real impact. All right, Georgia. We've gotten so used to Georgia always having a US Senate race, but not this year. In fact, if you as a potential donor or a potential volunteer are looking at Georgia, understand really the only game in town is the presidential race. That doesn't mean it's not important, but you should bear that in mind as a potential donor. Okay, voter registration. They do not have same-day registration. They do have automatic voter registration. They have an okay voter registration rate, but this isn't going to be a really high impact play. It's going to be okay. Voter turnout, look at that number. Almost 500,000 already registered voters in Georgia who list climate as a top priority yet they've never voted before. Voter turnout is a huge play in Georgia, as is voter persuasion. Michigan. You'll see so many tight races in Michigan. Voter persuasion is important. What I want to drill down on, though, is voter registration and voter turnout. Michigan has same-day registration. Again, what that means is, if I am one of your targets and you get me to the polling place, it doesn't matter if I'm not registered. And so essentially, voter registration is the same as voter turnout and vice versa. If you are eager to help in Michigan, if you are looking to support organizations who are working in Michigan, just understand that that is not as high an impact play. Same thing for voter registration. I run a climate voter turnout nonprofit. People beg to give us money to work in Michigan, and we have to tell them, no thanks. We can't have an impact with your money in Michigan, because the truth is most of the people who care about climate in Michigan already vote. Nevada. Almost every voter in Nevada is going to have important races up and down their ballot. Voter registration, normally I would say this is not an impactful play in Nevada, because you'll see not only do they have automatic voter registration, they also have same-day registration. But that's not colored red. It's a medium opportunity, and here's why. If you are an active registered voter in Nevada, you get mailed a ballot. You get mailed a ballot. And so if you can get more people to register to vote, especially over the next 2 months, that means they're going to have a ballot mailed to their house. And that is enormously important. It is proven to dramatically increase turnout. It also gives people like me and my nonprofit the opportunity to start haranguing them even earlier and say, hey, your ballot's about to arrive. North Carolina, pretty much the same thing as far as high value for multi-impact races, also high value for turnout and persuasion. Voter registration, they have same-day registration, but only during the early voting period. So turnout's okay here. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania does not have same-day registration. They have a fairly high registered voter number. If it weren't for the fact that Pennsylvania is the single most important state this fall, voter registration probably would not be an impactful play for you as a potential donor. But you'll see voter turnout and voter persuasion are huge opportunities here. Finally, Wisconsin has the same profile as Michigan. Voter registration is not a terribly impactful play in Wisconsin right now. They have same-day voter registration. You should just worry about getting people to the polls. Voter turnout, there are almost no non-voting environmentalists in Wisconsin. All right, if you want all of this in one slide, if you want to take a picture of something, you can see it here. And you'll see voter registration is very impactful in some states, but not others. Similarly, voter turnout is a really, really high impact opportunity for donors in most states, but not all. This is very important to bear in mind. Finally, I should say, unlike in most previous election cycles, demography is not destiny. You used to be able to say, oh, I want to help the climate movement, so I'm going to fund activities on college campuses. I'm going to turn out young people. Or if you were working for a very conservative organization, you would turn out older people or people in the suburbs. Demography is no longer destiny. Just as one example, the most recent New York Times poll that just came out, New York Times Siena poll, had Joe Biden losing among 18 to 29-year-olds by 8 percentage points, but winning among people 65 and older by 4 percentage points. Now, that is just one poll. I'm not saying you should take it to the bank. You should just view it as an illustration that investing in electoral opportunities that are targeting entire demographic groups is kind of a dangerous play now. And so we want to be really, really careful about that. If you want to learn more about the work that we do with the Environmental Voter Project, which is different from what we said here, what we do is we individually identify millions of non-voting environmentalists around the country and then mobilize them to vote. We will be having a meet and greet this evening. It's in the Silver Creek room right next to where the reception's going to be at 5:30. We would love to see you there. And I'll just close by saying, well, I'll close by saying two things. First of all, thank you for bearing with me through the slide difficulties. And second, I think there are some people who believe during an election cycle that sitting on the sidelines is neutral. It's not. It's not. When you choose to donate or volunteer or vote, you are having an impact. When you choose to not donate or not volunteer or not vote, you are still having an impact. And you're having an impact by taking all of your potential influence and power and moving it to the sidelines so that people who feel differently have more comparative power and more comparative influence. So you don't need me to tell you how crucial this moment is in the history of the climate crisis and how crucial this election is to the climate movement. And I hope that as you get engaged over the next 3.5 months, you bear in mind all of the things that we just discussed over the last 10 minutes. Thank you so much.